Hello, and welcome to another episode of Standing Stanley Tucci. I'm David.
And I'm Hannah. And guys, we are digging in with a strange Tucci feature today, an independent film project called In the Soup.
Yeah, I think we're back
It's
to
a
sort of Tucci's
1992 film.
roots in
Yeah.
sort of low budget New Yorker artsy fartsy cinema. It's possible that
Yeah.
this was, filmed earlier and just took some time to get the funding, or maybe they missed their mark before going to Sundance. This is a Sundance sort of film. It actually won the grand jury prize. It was competing against Reservoir Dogs that year, believe it or not. And yet totally forgotten by history. In the Soup.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a bizarre one. It's interesting because it's another one where Tucci stars alongside Steve Buscemi yet again.
Yes, he and Steve Buscemi have a long-standing friendship. They've collaborated on different projects, usually in sort of an executive producer type role. I think they had a shared production company at one point, but or at least they collaborated. But it's they're good pals. They're both good Italian boys from the Big Apple.
New
Uh,
York.
but in this
I
one,
think
it's just
so
sort of
far
a
our
bit part.
Buscemi count, yeah, it's definitely more of a bit part for Tucci, but he really makes the most of it, I will
Yeah.
say. Um, though I want to say this is what our Buscemi count is up to 3. I want to keep track of this.
Yeah, I believe it was Slaves of New York, um,
Hmm.
and then it was mob movie. God, Men of
The
Respect. No, Billy
Men
Bathgate.
of
Sorry,
Respect. Was it?
Billy
Oh,
Bath.
you're right. It was Billy Bathgate. Yep. They're all mob movies. Mob movie
Yeah.
doesn't narrow it down.
So, what is the story of In the Soup? What would you describe it as to
I'd
a
say
stranger on the street who you're saying you gotta watch this movie In the Soup? What's it about?
I'd say it's a fairly simple tale of a struggling poor artist who is trying to get a movie made and stumbles in with a wild crowd, and he's got a crush on a girl and hijinks ensue. That would be my quick plot synopsis of
Well,
In
I
the
think
Soup.
that's a good plot synopsis of Todd Solondz's fear, anxiety, and depression, but
Yeah.
I don't think it really captures In the Soup, even though they
Okay.
have the same plot. I think In the Soup, you say a batshit producer who's also a con man
Who's
uh,
mostly
takes an
just a con man.
interest. But he is a con man,
Yeah,
and
mostly.
what do you mean mostly? He's a con
Like
man.
he's not really a producer at all. He's just mostly a con man.
Right, but he takes an interest in a young filmmaker who's struggling to pay his rent and starts funding all of his movie dreams with crazy schemes. And that's this movie. And the lead, Steve Buscemi, plays Adolfo, who is sort of a stand-in for the director Alexandre Rockwell, who isn't related to Sam Rockwell, who has a brief cameo in this film, playing a person with a cognitive disability in
Yeah.
in a typical sort of 90s cliche sort of way. Like he wears a helmet.
Yeah.
It's not
And is
subtle.
like charmingly innocent.
Charmingly, but he's perceptive, right? He
Perceptive, yeah.
he can tell that Steve Buscemi's been sending his aunt flowers.
So where does the Tooch factor into all of this, David?
The Tooch plays Gregoire.
Gregoire
I can't do a French accent the way that he can. He's so he's
is
very French.
is
He's
very good.
Gregoire, and he is
She
the
eat
green
me. She eat me.
he's the green card husband of a woman named Angelica, who's the object of Steve Buscemi's affections.
Mm.
And it's a confusing sort of green card marriage because neither one of them is a US citizen.
Right. So, she was basically tricked into a green card marriage with this Frenchman because her English
Right.
wasn't very good.
And he stole her shoe because he loved her so much.
Yeah.
And now he owes her $3,000. And that
I think
is the extent of his subplot.
I mean, yes. It's great though, because we've heard all this, yelling from the apartment next door, and lo and behold, who should the yelling be coming from but the Tooch, as he's being kicked out of the apartment. And
Yeah, and
then
he's just this foul-mouthed Frenchman who's like, "Merde, this woman, she eat me
she
up
eats me.
inside."
No, well, no,
Uh,
no, no. She eats me up inside, but then she eats me. And he's like, "You what?" And she hits me. She hits me.
she eats me.
She
I
eats
guess I'm
me.
confused because the subtitles that I had did say eats.
Well, because she eats me up, but then later in the same sentence, the same way he says eats, he says eats for hitting.
Right. Sort of
So it's,
sort of playing with the language,
yeah.
Tucci, he's a master of delivery and language and
Oh my God.
dialects.
And he totally steals the scene. Like, all eyes are on him when he is just being this bizarre Frenchman stumbling
Right.
into Steve Buscemi's life.
As far as dialects go, I mean, we're definitely going to see the Tooch be British at points. We're going to see him German at points.
Very
Do you think we
German.
ever see French again?
We
Another
must. I can't imagine
another
he doesn't play another
another French
Frenchman.
Tooch, a Tooch de France.
Does he do French in Julie and Julia?
No, I don't believe he
No, he's
does.
American in that.
No, he's yeah, he's
All right.
he's the Julie's husband.
Mm. I didn't know if he was French or not. It's been so long since I've seen that movie.
Well,
He's got to do it
should we
again.
go through some other sort of plot points to lead up to the Tooch?
I guess if we must.
So it's this sort of like absurdist narrative, taking off of other sort of like French New Wave kind of films where it's just a series of random events. It's kind of Godardish, but it's also kind of not. But of course, it's very full of itself, as most,
Mhm.
like Passion Project indie Sundance films are. So it'll, of course,
It
reference Godard in the text and say,
it
I'm making a film. I'm a filmmaker, and my film is going to be just like Godard. And in it, I'm going to be friends with Dostoevsky and Nietzsche, and
right.
we're going to play ping pong together or something. I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Um,
It name drops a lot
right,
of like pretentious like thinkers and artists, which,
right.
not to say they don't have good ideas or make good art, but like if your art is relying on name dropping them, maybe you're not really saying anything all that interesting.
No, but I mean, this is like the point of the movie, right? Is
Right.
that like he's pretentious. He's not willing to just make a fun romance, which is what
Mm-hmm.
his, not really a producer, con man producer keeps telling him is like, change the title, unconditional surrender. I mean, it's so dark, and just make it a love story and, keep it simple, not all this complex stuff. But I love you as a filmmaker. I think you're amazing. So it's this sort of back and forth with this producer guy who you
Who's
don't really
just
know
a
what his deal
criminal.
is. He's a criminal. He goes around robbing people in the middle of the night, just like breaking into the house of an old couple, the man has Alzheimer's and he just steals from him and then says, I'm your son. Here we are on our way out.
Yep.
It's really
He steals a
ridiculous.
nice car. He, scams people, takes boxes off of the backs of trucks. It's,
Yeah.
Just a
And
guy in New York.
his big plan is to talk to the little person from Twin Peaks and get a bunch of drugs from him
Yeah.
and then sell them and then use the money to pay for this film because he really does care about the film in the end, it turns out.
Who knows though?
I know that this like is not really a recap in any way, shape, or form. It's just sort of a series
But
of unfortunate events, but that's sort of the
yeah,
way that the film comes across because it just sort of takes breaks from the
happens.
plot to have a little aside with Gregoire.
And the girlfriend character, who's of course this like beautiful waitress that Steve Buscemi has a crush on.
Right, who was
And
directed
that
to be like as cold to him as possible,
right.
and she just has no interest in him whatsoever
And he's gotta
until
convince her.
right. Well, she has no interest in him until this producer comes in and starts waving money around and says, this is a real film. You're gonna get all this money, and then suddenly, she's acting interested.
Well, I mean, sort of. It's weirder than that, though. Like, she doesn't really get interested until after she finds out that he's been the one sending her flowers, and after, she's able to use his apartment to get back into her apartment because she forgot her keys. Like, there's a
Right.
series of like weird events that lead up to it where he has the opportunity to sort of act chivalrously. But it's all just very bizarre.
Right. But I think, very much like fear, fear, depression, and anxiety, you have a lot of just things about how this guy's a loser. Adolfo, he can't get his act together. He can't make his art.
Mhm.
So you have him like cooking and he's like just throwing together like random disgusting ingredients to make this kind of weird tuna casserole egg soup with pickle juice or something.
Yeah.
And then you have him, he like gets a job, but it's to go on a show called The Naked Truth where they get him naked and ask him questions and then put it on TV. And this is where they bring in actual director Jim Jarmusch to like guest star as the director of this Naked Truth show.
And what's her name from
Carol
Kimmy Schmidt?
Kane.
Carol Kane,
Yes,
yes.
a lot of you might know her as the landlady from Kimmy Schmidt, but she was also, the wife of Miracle Max in
Yes.
The Princess Bride, and she's also had a bit part on Seinfeld. She's
Just
she's
like,
great. She's my whomst we also for
yeah,
this one.
absolutely. She's
I think
incredible.
she's a
And like
delightful,
her,
character actor. She has that very New York aesthetic. Like she can't be
well,
from anywhere but New York.
right, like she just has that voice. Like her voice is instantly recognizable. And it's
Yeah.
exactly the same when she's like, 25 in this movie, or maybe not, probably not 25, but like much younger in this movie versus Kimmy Schmidt, where she's like 50s or whatnot.
Right.
But like exactly the same.
Yeah, and she's like the kind assistant director to Jim Jarmusch's like really detached and like uncaring director. And
Hmm.
they pay him $40 to strip naked and answer questions. um there was a shot of the original Pizza Rat before there was Pizza Rat in New York. There was Pizza Rat in New York in the
And
soup.
in the soup.
There was just a rat eating pizza.
There you go. Gotta have a rat in pizza. Is it even New York?
Right. So we keep referring to him as the producer, but his name is Joe, and the joke is
Yes.
that he doesn't have a last name. He's just Joe,
Joe.
and
He's got a
his
weird
aesthetic
brother.
is sort of like if Weinstein was like more obvious about being Weinstein, you know what I mean? Like he's like Harvey Weinstein meets like a mobster or drug dealer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um
He's clearly supposed to be the eccentric old man,
right,
kind
but
of
he's the
trope.
kind of eccentric old man who will break into your house in the middle of the night and then wake you up in your bed and then hold you
by
down so you
kissing
can't
you.
move. And he does that
Right.
to Steve Buscemi, and then later on does it to the girl that he's interested in, Angelica. And
Mm-hmm.
he's always bringing like attractive women around saying like, hey, we'll put you in a movie, blah blah blah. And this is
Mm-hmm.
obviously, you know, based on probably some real experiences that the director had, the writer director,
Right.
uh, with trying to fund these like small budget movies, of producers coming to him and saying, oh, we'll give you all the money in the world, I'm just a fan of you, and then not
Mm-hmm.
ever really getting around to making the project because they're just eccentric wealthy people who are interested in movies in an abstract
For
sort of way.
clout.
For
Right.
clout,
Like
right?
they want to be able to say, oh, I funded a movie. I'm helping mentor an auteur and nurture an artist, but they don't actually have any interest in the movie or the art itself.
Right. um I don't know if I mentioned, but this movie's in black and white,
It is.
and also the movie within a movie is in black and white. I guess it'd be funnier if
Well,
it
it would
was in
have to
color.
be.
Right, but it's textually black and white, and so
Yes.
one of the jokes that about Joe is that he knows nothing about film. So he's like, hey, it's in black and white, reminds me of the Honeymooners, you know, like he just thinks it's like old TV.
Yeah.
um and then, you know, Steve Buscemi's like, no, it's, I'm trying to go for like Renoir,
French
Godard.
New Wave.
Right. um so yeah, there's a series of criminal activities that Steve Buscemi gets dragged on. So Joe at one point dresses up as Santa and steals a cop's car, not a cop car, but a cop's personal vehicle, to go sell it for scraps. Shortly after that crime, we get introduced to Gregoire through the peephole of Steve Buscemi's door. So it's like a fisheye lens of him sort of going like, ah, man, you make me crazy. Um, and then he comes in and says, you know, I need to go through your window onto the fire escape to get into my apartment because I lost my keys.
Jeez.
You know, the way he says it, everything is so exaggeratedly French.
Yeah.
Um,
But like I
and
love how Tucci plays
yeah,
exasperated here. Like an
right.
exasperated Frenchman. Like he really does nail it. And like he's got a lot of the classic like, oh, touching my forehead. Oi. You know,
But I
his
think we
classic.
see a lot more of Tucci, emotional Tucci, than we've seen at all so far, because we've never seen him break down in tears up until this point. And we get to hear his like comedic sadness, which I think is definitely a skill. If you were to put it on a resume, it'd be like, I can do very high pitched sobbing,
Oh my
like I'm
gosh.
crying, like I'm a little girl, like I'm breaking down, and I can do that comedically and not make it seem too ridiculous.
Yes. Oh, I mean, we have to mention the true pièce de résistance of this performance, though, which is the origination of the Borat "My Wife."
Right. Oh, my wife. She
My
eats
wife.
me. She eats me. She's violent. And then she is beautiful. No, my wife. My wife is
My
so
wife.
beautiful. I will
But
sleep on the floor. That's what happens. And
yep.
then, you know, a couple of scenes later, and Angelica has to do the exact same thing and try and go through Buscemi's apartment onto the fire escape to get into her place.
Yep.
And that's when she finds the shoe that he left behind, and says, "That bastard owes me $3,000." Uh, and that's you know, that's gonna come back later. Just
Yeah.
you wait.
So, you know, later on, I think this is the last time we see Tucci. There's a dream sequence where uh, the main character believes that Tucci has broken into Angelica's apartment and has her tied up and screaming, and that you know,
Right. You
he's
see
about
him
to
kind of
murder
like
her.
psychopathically like washing his hands in a toilet.
Is it a toilet? Is that what he's washing his hands in?
Yeah, at least that's what it looks like. Maybe it's just a water basin, but like it looks like he's just dunking his hands in a toilet and then going to Angelica tied up and talking about how like you're sleeping with him, aren't you? That handsome Steve Buscemi boy next door. Did you sit on his lap? But it was just a dream.
It
And so
was
then
just a
he
dream.
he he sort of breaks into her apartment to check on her.
Right. And no, it is just her nephew having a fun pillow fight with her children, her nieces and nephews,
Yeah,
her
her
brothers
nieces
and
and nephews.
sisters.
She lives with her uncle. Or I
Yeah.
guess it's sort of her cousins then maybe? I don't know.
I don't know.
The point is they're not her kids. She's not married other than to Gregoire, and it's a
Gregoire.
loveless marriage. Um and so then there's like another fantasy sequence like right after that because Joe has like made Angelica agree to be in the movie. So now Buscemi is fantasizing that Joe is going to like break into her apartment, kill her uncle, and then like grab her.
Oh.
And so it's just these like jealousy fantasies. It's
Hmm.
kind of like a really basic form of storytelling in a film to
Yeah.
just be like, what is our character worried about? What is he thinking about? Just
Well,
do an
here's
over
a
the top
dream.
dream sequence.
Yeah. Um,
Um, then at like the hour mark, where like still like it's not clear exactly what the plot is. We just have like a 5-minute sequence of Steve Buscemi trying to learn the cha
also,
cha from a
this
record.
all seems like it happens in the course of like a week, because like they're
It
talking about
does,
Christmas at the beginning,
yeah,
and
and
then
then it's New
towards the
Year's,
end it's New Year's,
yeah,
and then there's like a couple days after that. It's a very
yeah,
strange timeline.
yeah. Well, it's like a week's time.
But they do a lot of crime for a week.
They do a crime a day, yeah.
It's maybe more than a crime a day, but yeah.
Right, maybe. So the next like major plot point is that Joe sort of forces himself on Angelica and then brings two girls over to Adolfo's place to like replace Angelica, because she's called him a pig and run out. And so the girl that he brought for Adolfo like offers him a blow job and he's like, no, I'm not like that. And then she turns on the TV and he's naked on there. It's the naked truth. And so they have a good laugh and
It
it's no
breaks the
longer,
ice.
yeah, it's no longer like this dark dirty scene about like the power of like a producer to take advantage of women, and now it's like a goofy scene about how he's awkward with women.
Right. And then he's like, hey, you want to put your head in my lap? And she's like, no, I'm going to go to bed now. You're
Right.
a loser.
um right, so then the next day they commit like this major crime. It's sort of the big crime that's going to finally pay for this movie, which is getting drugs from the little person who was in all the fantasy sequences in Twin Peaks, and a man dressed in a gorilla suit. He says the code word. He says, I'm Joe Blow from Kokomo. And then he's supposed to go pick up a rental car so that they can drive the drugs to the trading place, but there's no rental car there. And then you find out that Joe's brother Skippy is dead.
No.
And then you're like, Joe's gonna double cross him and he's gonna get him busted and he's gonna take the money. So he comes up with this brilliant plan to kidnap the guy that he said was his kid, his estranged son, and kidnap him and threaten Joe with taking his kid's life. And then
Yeah.
he's like, actually, I lied. That's not my kid. Wah, wah. Also,
Yeah.
weirdly, he threatens him with like a plastic
Empty
Coke
plastic
bottle.
bottle. It's very strange.
So it's like not really a threat. It's just kind of another absurdist thing. So then
Yeah.
at that point, like Angelica has been hanging out with Joe again, and they like take him to the pier, to the beach,
Yeah.
and they're just like having a casual conversation about, hey, I got you all this money in this teddy bear to make your movie. We're finally gonna make your movie. And it's like it ends kind of ambiguously, like how much of a con man was he?
Well, right, because at one point he pulls out a gun and then there's a struggle over the gun, and
Right.
Angelica ends up accidentally shooting him, which we don't realize until the very end. Like
Right. It's a weird scene because you hear the gunshot, you see him get shot, and then he goes, haha, fooled you. And then like a scene later after saying, you gotta make this movie, he
and make it a love
dies from
story. Do
that
it for
same
me.
gunshot. And you're like, okay, so how did when the gunshot happened, how did it not make blood spurt out? Like,
In
how
the
would you not have
back.
noticed
Right.
he dying?
Yeah. Also he's like, you gotta make the movie a love story. Do it for me. And the
Right.
ending
And
voiceover, he goes, I'm gonna make my movie and it'll be a love story by Jove. And
but
like
it'll be
that's
about us, you know. So
ah
the punchline is sort of like it was a love story between Joe and Adolfo.
Adolfo, that's what it was. Forget his
So
name.
kind of like a pointless end to that movie. The
Was
only
like
other scene that
this.
Tucci appears in is in voiceover, where they do a
Yeah.
phone call to him to threaten him for the $3,000 he owes for
Yeah.
stealing that shoe.
I
And
don't think it
then
was
yeah.
for stealing the shoe was the $3,000. I think it was like from their marriage.
You may be right
Like,
about that, but the way that it's set up is that she sees the shoe in Adolfo's apartment, and she says,
yeah.
"God damn it! I threw out the other shoe because I thought he wasn't going to give it back. That bastard owes me $3,000." It's like the very next line. So if it wasn't the shoe that was supposedly a $3,000 pair of shoes, it's written to be kind of confusing.
Okay. I don't know if I don't know if I remember it quite that way, but I'll trust you on this. It's fine. It's not important. It's a small detail. That's basically the movie.
Right.
David, do we have any Tucci news for this week?
I don't really have anything too substantial to report. I'll just give you the basics. He was given an honorary degree from the American University of Rome. Um, we missed it earlier. In January, he was supposed to star in a Roland Emmerich film called Moonfall, but he was
Mm.
replaced by Michael Pena, which is a weirdly different
Very
casting
two
choice
different
at the
people.
last
Yeah.
minute. The reason he was replaced is not because he's a flake or something, but it's because he lives in the UK and they stopped flights for COVID to Canada. So he's been forcibly out of work due to this COVID outbreak, and we're all praying for him.
Yeah.
But he'll be fine.
He'll be fine.
Other than that, I don't think there has been too much Tucci news these
No,
last few weeks.
laying low for a little bit.
Yeah,
All
he's
right.
down after being snubbed at the Oscars.
Well, David, what do we have coming up next week?
Well, next week we're gonna be talking about we're gonna have another regular Talking Tropes episode, and we're gonna be talking about Cruella, which all of the Tumblr discourse is already, extreme, and the
Piling
Twitter
in.
discourse is extremely excited about this movie. We're just as excited, and we're
I'm
sure it's
ready.
gonna be phenomenal.
So good. Movie of the year, I'm sure.
And I think we're gonna have a lot to talk about it in terms of tropes,
Yeah.
because, well, it's a villain character who is now an anti-hero, and that
It's
is
a
as tropey as it gets,
and made by Disney,
and
like
made by
the
Disney.
ultimate in tropes.
Right. So
But
we'll
yeah.
do that next time, and then our next Tucci, I think, is going to be Beethoven, the dog movie.
The dog movie.
And we will see you next time on Standing Stanley Tucci.
Bye-bye.
Bye.